Hi, my name is Sarah. I work for the Friends of Jasper National Park, and today we're going to be certifying you to get your Level 1 Sightline Clearing certification. Here in Jasper National Park, we have 11,000 square kilometers of nature to enjoy. Of that, we have 2,000 kilometers of trail. So in you getting your Sightline Clearing certification, you're able to help us and Parks Canada maintain those 2,000 kilometers of our vibrant official trail network. So Sightline Clearing is the process of clearing any overgrown vegetation, hanging branches, or deadfall that you find along the trail. The main reason that we sightline clear in Jasper is for safety. So anytime we're sightline clearing, what we're doing is we're clearing the trail corridor so that you have that clear line of sight so that you can see other users, so that you can move off the trail and adjust as necessary, and so that you can also see wildlife. So wildlife is a big component of life here in Jasper National Park. So anytime that we're clearing bearberry bushes off the side of the trail, it's a huge safety gain and one of the biggest benefits of our sightline clearing certification. So whenever you do choose to go out and do some sightline clearing, there's a couple things that you want to make yourself familiar with on the trail before you get to that cutting. So you want to set the foundation. So if you're on a trail, what you want to do is you want to think about where you are, what kind of users you're going to expect to see on this trail, and then a little bit of thought needs to go into what type of trail is this? Where is the trail going? Does it have a little bit of flow? Those are all things that you need to start with before you even start cutting your sight lines. So anytime you're sightline clearing, you have to think about the largest user that trail is going to see. In this case, on our trail here, we expect horses to be using this trail. So that means that our trail ceiling, which is the maximum height at which we're going to cut our vegetation, that is going to be around 8 to 10 feet. Now, if there's a trail you're working on that is solely hikers or bikers, an 8-foot ceiling is very acceptable. The other thing you have to think about, other than the trail ceiling, is the trail tread. So what is under us? You want to think about the trail tread because there's many different types of tread that you'll see in the park. The trail that we're on right now is a wildland trail or a single track trail, and then you'll also get some multi-use trails that are much wider. So from any trail, you just want to establish where that trail footprint is, because that'll give you the foundation and the guideline to then create your zone to sightline clear. The other areas you want to consider when you're beginning to plan your sightline clearing is, are there any signs that I want to make sure are super clear? The other spot that we want to pay special attention to is busy junctions, corners, stream crossings, or descents. You want to make sure that the junctions are clear for all users entering them to ensure safety and there's no user conflict. Those are the 4 main considerations that you should think about when you're setting the stage and setting your foundation for sightline clearing. Just to recap, they are the trail ceiling, how high you want to cut, the trail footprint, what kind of tread are you working with, and what kind of trail are you on. You want to think about where your signage is, and you want to consider the junctions that are around you. So now that we've set the foundation of what we're going to cut, we're going to talk a little bit about the theory of how to do that. Now in Jasper National Park, we feel so lucky that we're able to certify people under this certification. We are the only organization across Canada that can certify people for volunteer-based work in a Canadian mountain national park. So we take our guidelines very seriously and hope you do too. Let's dive into those guidelines a little bit here. So in Jasper, we are permitted to clear from 1 meter from the edge of the tread into the bush. So as we discussed before, you're going to look down at your trail tread, put your heels on the edge of the trail tread, and take a natural 1 meter step into the brush. And from me to that edge of the tread is going to be our zone in which we can clear. Now within this zone, there are some additional guidelines that we do need to follow. So any vegetation that you can see, a lot of these willows or berry bushes, those can get cut no matter where they are within this meter. Now things get a little bit complicated when there's a tree within our 1 meter distance from the edge of the tread. The way we break down trees within our guidelines is trees that are 4 inches in diameter and more. We leave them where they are. We do not remove them, but what we do is we do something called lollypopping. Lollypopping is when you take the branches off a tree 360 degrees around the trunk up until the trail ceiling that we talked about previously. So this allows us to quite literally see through the trees. So especially when they're situated on corners, it allows our vision to be able to go right through that tree and to see the trail on the other side of that corner, thus eliminating a lot of dangerous blind corners. Now, within our guidelines, if a tree is less than 4 inches in diameter, what we do is we take a little step back, we look at that tree up and down, we make sure that there's no animals or any signs of wildlife in that tree, and if that tree has no signs of present wildlife, then we will cut it down. And that's because any tree within our 1 meter does what a tree is going to do, and it's going to grow, and in about 5 years time that tree is going to be blocking our trail, and so we want to prevent that by sightline clearing them now, and so that in 5 years time we've got a beautiful trail corridor. Okay, so we've talked about our trees that are larger than 4 inches and less than 4 inches. Now, what we're going to talk about is when trees are sitting right on your 1 meter line. If it is within the 4 inches and you're debating whether you should cut it or not, what we recommend doing is identifying it. So this tree right here is a pine tree, and pine trees grow really tall and slender, and they don't really have many thick branches around the bottom. So in this case, with a pine, we would most likely leave this tree to grow, and in a couple years we could come back and lollipop it. Now, in the case that this tree right on our 1 meter line was a spruce, without a doubt it would go. Spruce, they grow really quickly and they like to spread out. So you can imagine that if we left this spruce to grow, in a year or two, its branches would likely be close to that trail tread. So trees that we don't cut are aspen trees a lot of the time. We don't bother cutting when they're on our 1 meter, just because, as you can see around me in this beautiful aspen forest, aspen trees go really tall and they really don't have any branches on the bottom half of them. Now, pine trees are where it gets a little bit tricky. In Jasper National Park, we have an endangered pine tree called the whitebark pine, and under no circumstances should that tree be removed. So even if it is within that 1 meter of between you and the trail tread, it does not get removed. However, lodgepole pine, which is another pine species we have in the park, those, if they are within your 1 meter zone and under 4 inches, they can be removed. However, if they are on our 1 meter line and it's about a 50-50 whether it goes or it stays, keep that tree and we'll come back in a couple years and we will lollipop it. So up till now, we've gone over the foundation of sightline clearing. We've gone over our guidelines. And so now comes the fun part where we actually get into clearing. Tips for clearing is whenever you're lollipopping a tree, whenever you're clearing vegetation, what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're clearing as close to the surface that you are cutting. So that means if it's a tree trunk and you're cutting the branches off, we want to make sure that we are getting a nice flush cut, and that this is not going to be a hazard for any trail users. And the same goes with the ground, cutting as close to the ground as possible, and that's purely for safety. As well, when you're clearing, you're naturally going to start to accumulate a little bit of a debris pile from all of the vegetation and the branches and the trees that you've cut. So as that pile starts to form, our best practice is that once you've got a sizable pile, you pick that up and we ask that you go at least 10 meters into the bush to disperse your pile of debris. And we ask that you disperse it and not leave it just in a pile so that the area maintains its natural aesthetic and so that there's no further footprint on the surrounding area. So we've talked a lot about sightline clearing to this point, and another element of our sightline certification allows you to remove deadfall off the trail. Now, sightline clearing is very much like an art form. You get to flow with the intent of the trail, whereas in contrast, deadfall clearing is very much like a black and white first aid situation. Deadfall happens a lot on our trails here in Jasper, and a lot of the time you'll be biking, running, walking along a trail, and you'll find a tree down in your path. So we're gonna go over a few tips and safety precautions to consider if you do come across deadfall on the trail and you'd like to clear it. Whenever you're approaching said scenario, which in our case is going to be a tree laying across the trail, you want to approach the scene with caution and assess for any hazards. Hazards in this scenario are going to be anything that may have become unstable on either side of the trail with that tree falling, or anything in the canopy above us. Did that tree fall and cause some instability? So the most important thing is to assess your hazards, assess your surroundings, and make sure to look up. Once you're comfortable with your area, you're going to move on to assessing your patient, or in this case, your tree. First thing you want to assess, is this within my personal scope? Think about your strength, your personal capacity, and that'll help you determine how many cuts you're going to make in that tree to be able to effectively move it off the trail. So when you come upon a tree, depending on its size, there's a bunch of different things that we can do to remove that deadfall. The easiest is to simply drag it off the trail. The second would be to cut it down the middle of the trail and remove those two sides. And then lastly, we can buck it up into smaller pieces to remove off the trail. If this is a massive tree, and I personally know it's beyond my personal capacity, a benefit to any piece of deadfall will be to remove the branches. And that's so that even if that tree is not removed, users can get over the tree and continue down the trail. So once those branches are cut, you're also going to think about clearing yourself a safe area to be cutting. You're going to want to consider, am I on a corner, maybe putting a bag around the corner so users know to slow down and so you don't get hit from behind. So taking all this into consideration, you can now start approaching your tree and start thinking about how you're going to get it off the trail. So in our case, we've stumbled upon a relatively small piece of deadfall. Now, in situations where the deadfall is a little bit larger, something to be aware of is that it may be holding some tension. Now, the tension will oftentimes be at the bottom of that tree or at the top. It'll be at the top usually if it's being propped up on either side or if that tree is a little bit bowed. Now, anytime you're cutting deadfall, the most embarrassing thing that can happen is that your saw gets stuck while you're cutting. To save the embarrassment of getting your saw stuck in a tree that is holding some tension, here's a little tip as to how to alleviate that. So pretending that this tree is carrying tension on the underside right here, what we're going to do is we're going to start by cutting the tree from the bottom and cut a 1/3 cut all the way up the tree. And so what this does is we alleviate that tension before we continue a cut all the way through. All right, so we've cut a little bit more than 1/3, but then what we're gonna do is we're gonna make sure we carry our cut to the top. And I'm just giving myself a little guideline. And then we can continue our cut from the top. And if all goes well, we will hopefully meet that first cut. And you can see our two cuts here have met, and we can easily clear this tree off the trail. And anytime you're deadfall clearing, make sure that any deadfall is moved at least 2 meters from the edge of the tread. Something important to mention about this certification is that you're never obligated to clear any deadfall or sightlines that you come across. We are looking to equip you with the skills to do so, but it's never an obligation.
Thank you for listening to this course. To complete your full certification, get in touch with us at trails@friendsofjasper.com.
And yeah, cheers.